So, my dear guest, Anabelle Bugatti, welcome to Liberate Your Authentic Self.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you because I don't think I've ever interviewed a marriage officiant. So, in addition to you being, a licensed marriage and family therapist, helping couples through the sticky side of life, you also get to be there for the joyful celebration. So I'm excited to talk to you.
Thank you. Absolutely. That's one of the more fun parts of what I do.
I get it. And yeah, let's focus on a little fun. So I love that one of the things that you believe in is that we should dream big in love, in life, and in our career even. And one of the things that you said is that you really help people develop kind of a roadmap and equip them with the tools to get them to that life of their dreams. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So, I have a lot of couples and individuals too that sort of hold themselves back from getting, the most out of life, the most out of love that they deserve. A lot of it is self-esteem issues, some things that happened to them growing up that they haven't quite resolved. And it's really sad because they're really beautiful and amazing people. And, I hear just wonderful, amazing aspects of their personality. And I go in, I'm like, okay, yes, this right here. We want to focus on this, and sort of helping them to manifest, the trajectory of their life that they want, if that's an amazing love relationship or a really successful career or just the best version of themselves. And I do stress authentic living as a way to get to that place.
Yeah, that's one of the other things that obviously we share in common, and that it's this idea of congruence is something else that you said you believe is like fundamental. You got to have that. What do you mean exactly by congruence?
And thank you so much for that. That is one of my most favorite words. And it is actually a core value for counselors and therapists. It's written into our standard code of ethics. And congruence, to boil it down to nuts and bolts is sort of like you're walking the talk, you're, practicing what you preach. And it's really where, what happens inside is matching what's happened on the outside. It's congruent. So, what I present to people is not a false self, and I'm not afraid to be my authentic self because I have good self-esteem. I know my value and I don't have to compromise my boundaries in order to feel like I need approval or get people to like me. And I know that's a huge temptation, but really being able to reflect outwardly what's going on inside without feeling like you need to cover it up or hide it or minimize or dismiss is really a way that you can be congruent.
Mm-hmm. And what do you tell people who have a hard time focusing on the positive in their own character or in their own life, and they feel like they're just not good enough, they're not worthy, they're not valuable?
Right, absolutely. And it is a process, something that we generally have to fight together over time. A lot of it is fighting that temptation to buy into those little seeds of doubt that say, you're not good enough. If you don't do this, they're going to not be your friend, or they're going to dump you and move on to someone else. And I have clients struggle with this constantly. And, we really work on, again, knowing who you are and really coming to accept that person is valuable and lovable and worthy and deserving of love. And that if somebody doesn't want to buy what they're selling, they're not the right customer, right? It's okay. Let them move along, right? Because you want to remain open for the person that does see your value. And I often say, it's a really great quote that says, your worth doesn't diminish based on somebody's inability to recognize your value. And
yeah, I love that. But what do you do for people who've been in so many years of that pattern of people pleasing? When you say that you want them to help to know themselves and accept themselves if they've been putting themselves off for so long and like, chameleonizing themselves to fit in for other people? How do you help people get really in touch with who they really are?
And that can be a really scary process. It's something we do together where we explore what's underneath, what's behind those thoughts. Tell me where those thoughts came from. Who told you that that was true? And then we work on, okay, well, you're saying you're not worth anything. Is there any evidence that actually says that? And, 100% of the time, there's never any evidence. And then we look at the evidence that counters that. Oh, look at all these, cool projects that you're a part of. Look at how successful you are. Look at what a good mom you are. Look at what a good husband you are. Really like demonstrating the ways that they are succeeding and, really helping them to explore some of the scary parts, because again, there's a lot of parts of our emotions that a lot of people don't want to get to know. They're afraid because there's a lot of pain there. And so people have this tendency to minimize the painful and hurtful feelings that they feel and stuff it down and try to only express joy or happiness. But pain is important too. And I find with my clients, when you numb one, you numb all. You feel angry, you feel a little bit happy, but when you diminish, when you dismiss and suppress that pain, you also diminish and suppress true, amazing joy. And people don't feel as alive as they'd like to because they're working so hard to keep down the painful parts. They're not free.
Well, how do you help people get to that point of courage that you're talking about, that courage to face the darkness or feel the pain?
Well, it starts together. I sort of guide them through this. And the first part is really having the courage to admit that this place is there, just to say it out loud. And usually it starts, I'm usually the first person they say it to, right? And I'm there supporting them, showing love and warmth, really encouraging their braveness and, demonstrating to them, look how courageous you're being right now. This is not weakness. This is strength. Vulnerability is a sign of strength. It is not weakness at all. And a lot of times when they are able to sort of admit this for the first time, and then we work on helping them to admit this to their most closest others. It's an act of being vulnerable and feeling that others love them, that they're not running for the hills. They're not telling them how terrible they are. They're able to have a new experience that says, oh, this isn't so bad. This isn't so scary. People can love me even on those moments when I hurt, and they're not telling me how bad and awful and terrible I am, or I'm not a man, or I need to suck it up, buttercup. They're recognizing I can get support. And it's like it frees the ghost. I say people are haunted, like they have this poltergeist and they keep it locked away thinking, oh, I'm not going to feel it. It's not there, but it haunts them very deeply. So we sort of like free it and let it go to the light, and it no longer holds any power. And then they're able to really authentically feel the joy and again, be congruent because they're no longer afraid to hold back those moments when they're not feeling so good.
But what do you say to someone whose partner has been, sort of demeaning them and making them feel like they can't express their true feelings?
That is a really great question, and one that so many people struggle with. And it can be really difficult and scary to try to share that with your partner. And oftentimes when I do have people share that, their partner is very surprised. Like they have no idea that they're having that impact. Sometimes they recognize they get defensive and that they can be insulting when they're angry. And a lot of times when I ask clients, so are you really sharing this? They'll say, oh, well, I tried sharing it and it didn't work out. When I ask them how they shared it, they themselves are still coming from a place of defensiveness and angry, and they're anticipating their partner to react badly, which then triggers the threat cue. And of course, their partner is going to get reactive, but being able to let them know in a way that makes it about you and not about them being bad, just saying, this really hurts me and I feel really hurt. And it can be really hard to tolerate when your partner says, you've really hurt me. And both of you, if you need to see a life coach or a therapist, so that you can work on that journey together, and both of you join into this place of congruence and acceptance of each other. Again, you free each other for optimal and full free expression of your most authentic self. And it creates this most amazing love relationship between the two of you because it's honest and both of you are truly free to love and accept one another without being hurtful.
It sounds like that's kind of opening up true intimacy. Why do you think that people are so afraid of intimacy?
I don't think people are, I think the problem is that people don't recognize or really understand what intimacy looks like.
So what does it look like then?
Well, most people, I think, what I've found is when they think of intimacy, they think of sexual intimacy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them end up putting a lot of emphasis on the sex in their relationship because they don't know how to get to that emotional intimacy, which oftentimes is the most deepest core of our core. And when you're able to get that, it even makes your sex life more amazing, more powerful, more passionate. And so intimacy, real emotional intimacy, is being able to share those most vulnerable parts of yourself with each other. That it's okay for me to expose my hurts, my wounds, my tender places to you. And those are very special, very tender places. And it is to be respected when somebody reveals that. And it's such a gift, and I help couples when one of them starts to be vulnerable for the first time. I work and help the partner to accept that gift. Look at what your partner is doing for you right now. He's really giving you this gift of vulnerability right now. And they really start to move into a place of gratitude and appreciation for their spouse, and their respect levels and their love goes through the roof. And when they're able to cry together, when they're able to be free to be themselves together, because we're not always hiding things we're ashamed of or things we're afraid that you may not accept, then again, it frees us open to feel better ourselves and have a more authentic, genuine relationship that just goes deeper and deeper and blossoms and becomes amazing. And this emotional connectedness blooms and becomes so intense and powerful. And then couples start having the best sex they've ever had.
So what do you think is like a first step towards having those intimate, sharings of vulnerability? Do you really think that, I've seen all of these wonderful experiments where people will sit down and they do these card games, or they have to ask each other questions, even on a first date or a blind date or speed dating. What do you think about that as an approach to just getting comfortable with being vulnerable?
Well, those questions can be a great conversational piece, but I don't find that they're very deep or intimate, actually. They tend to ask, general personality questions, and hopefully you're sharing that anyway. If you're not much of a talker, it can be a good tool to help you getting used to expressing who you are. We have a lot of clients, we call them withdrawers. They tend to be more introverted, and again, their overwhelming sense is that what I have inside might hurt you, is unacceptable by you. So the first step that I have couples of any or anybody of any personality start to look at is there some part of myself that I am too afraid to share with my partner? And even a step beyond that is there some place inside my heart, inside my emotions that I'm afraid to go to, that I'm afraid to express with myself? Because intimacy needs to start with yourself. And so people have to be willing to ask themselves the hard and scary questions and get to know themselves in that deeper and most vulnerable way. And that's really the first step, because if you don't know who you are or how you're feeling, if you're not truly in touch with that, you're not going to be able to give a very clear and succinct message to your partner for them to receive and understand and be with you in that place. And again, it can be hard if you're not used to identifying those emotions. You may have to really experiment, sit with yourself. A lot of times people get some kind of physical sensation when they're angry or sad or hurt, that gives them a cue. You know, your body will give you cues, and that's the fast and easiest way to try to understand your emotions more deeply, is to tune into the bodily cues and notice, how do I feel when I say this? Or how do I feel when my partner says this? And really have the courage to explore the depths of your own emotions and your own feelings. And then you can help your partner more deeply understand where you're coming from when you understand it yourself.
Sounds like a fun process. I love the process of inquiry, of asking questions, because like you said, there's so many things that we leave unsaid, that we leave buried, that we don't even want to touch or look at. Well, when we get back from the break, I'd love to learn more about your approach to hard work. I know that you've said that you really do believe, especially as an officiant for weddings, you believe that achieving happily ever after is actually possible if we put in the hard work. So when we get back from the break, we'll pick it up there. Tune in daily to get fired up with insight and inspiration for purposeful living, conscious relationships, and soulful success. You're watching Liberate Your Authentic Self with me, Dr. Andrea Pennington. Check out the live version of this show, where I answer your questions in real time. Visit facebook.com/Dr. Andrea Pennington. So, do you still believe in happily ever after? Even if you've had some bad relationships and maybe even a painful divorce, today's guest says happily ever after is totally achievable. And yes, it may take some hard work. Having learned some painful lessons herself, Anabelle Bugatti is here to share with you some insights and some advice on how to have the most fabulous love life possible. So, Anabelle, before we went to the break, we were talking about this idea of the hard work. You know, I think some of us believe that, we can just manifest our soulmate, our ideal partner, and everything is just going to be birds singing. But really being in relationship with another human of any kind is going to require some effort. If you don't want to call it work, maybe at least call it effort. What do you think?
Absolutely. It does require effort. It's one of those, if you feed something, it grows, right? And if we're not feeding our marriage, and I find a lot of couples, they have this false expectation when they get together that it's like, I got a puppy, but it's going to take care of itself and I don't have to feed it. I don't have to water it. Or I've just planted this rose in the front yard and I don't need to tend to it. And if anybody's ever grown roses, they know they're rather persnickety, and you need to tend to it constantly, making sure it has good soil, food, the right temperature, the right degree of sun. And that's exactly how relationships are. And you really do get out what you put into it. And if you're not feeding it, it's going to shrivel up and die, unfortunately.
So where would you suggest a new couple, a couple who's, still in that infatuation, they're looking at each other as the perfect ideal mate? What would you suggest that we do early on to build that intimacy, to start making that effort, to really be vulnerable and build something that can last?
That's a really great question. I have some amazing couples who come to me who are in their very early stages of marriage, and they've already started to notice some discrepancies in expectations. And of course, that's leading to them to get into these vicious cycles of fights. And they'll actually come and say, okay, we want to nip this in the bud now before it grows into something really terrible. And that is the most optimal time to start the work and get your marriage off to a solid foundation, because I have couples that will wait till they've been married 20, 30 years, and the damage is so, it's so much deeper, so rigid and set that it's so much harder to get couples to experience deeper and longer change. But when you have a more positive outlook, it's so much easier to do the work. I always find that couples have an easier time putting the work in the relationship when they're feeling happy about it. And when they're feeling hurt, it can become a demotivator to putting in the effort. And that's hard. That's really hard, you know? Yeah.
So rather than struggling on our own, then you're suggesting maybe everyone should see a relationship coach or a therapist?
Yeah, why not? I mean, the cool thing about therapists and coaches, we know what questions to ask. We know how to get to the places that you have probably been running from or afraid to shine the light on. So you come in and we'll give you a flashlight and we'll go in together. And I have some amazing and beautiful couples that come in, and we see these moments where they're coming to know themselves in a deeper and more authentic way. And their partner is sitting right there with them, and they're reaching out to them and holding their hands and comforting them. And it is so healing, not only for the person doing the exploration, but for their partner to hear. Because a lot of times I find that couples have no idea why their partner is the way that they are or why they react certain ways. And a lot of that, again, is we're not being our authentic self. We're not communicating. I'm really hurt. This is triggering some really awful memory that I, haven't really dealt with. And, they're not sharing those things. They get mad, they get reactive, they start insulting each other. And so a lot of what they go through, their deeper experience, is hidden from their partner. And then their partner is left sort of making up their own assumptions as to why this is taking place. And 99.99% of the time, those assumptions are wrong. And that helps them get more and more disjointed and off track from each other, because we're both jumping to these assumptions about each other that are wrong, which could be cleared by just sharing those deep parts of ourselves.
But why do you think it is so hard for us to be honest?
I think, the fear of being rejected by your partner, the fear that, what you have inside isn't acceptable. A lot of people have been hurt in very deep ways. And somewhere along the line, somebody has given them the message that, your feelings are not justified, you're being ridiculous. And it goes from very superficial, you're ridiculous, to deep, you're fundamentally unworthy as a human being. And I had this really amazing couple in my practice, and the husband tends to get really anxious. He has this heart of gold for his wife. He just loves her, but he gets really anxious and reactive when he can't reach her. And so then he starts to poke and prod and pick fights, right? And she has no idea, why do you just keep making fights? We're fine. And we were able to do some really deep, amazing work. And we found out that for him, he doesn't know how to get true and deep emotional connection. And as a kid, he had abandonment issues from his parents. They had traveling sales jobs. And so they would come home and be home for a time, and then they'd leave again. And they said, every time my parents came home, I felt like I had to start over getting to know them again. And then they'd leave and I felt abandoned. And so every time they left, it got more and more hurtful, especially as they got older. And so a way to sort of protect themselves from feeling that hurt from that abandonment was to go into his head and rationalize and explain and justify. And a lot of people do this. If I can get lost in my thoughts and use my thoughts to explain away and make sense of what's happening, that will minimize the pain. And what it ends up doing is numbing out the pain and completely suppressing it to where you're always doing this. It becomes your go-to strategy. And then you no longer start understanding how you feel. When you ask them, well, how do you feel about this in this moment? When your partner says that, they're like a deer in the headlights. I have no idea how I feel. And when we did this really deep and amazing work and discovered this part of himself, this part that numbs out his feelings through his thoughts, and that it is his protective mechanism, he began to understand, again, like I mentioned before, that the only way he knows to experience deep connection with his wife is through sex, because he doesn't know the words for his feelings. And then his wife feels all this pressure, this imbalance on sex, because it does thrust an imbalance. She wants the emotional connection. She longs for that. And I help her express that to him, that, she does want to hear this deep part of him. And that really helps him feel like, okay, it's safe. You want to hear it, instead of, well, it's going to be awkward and you're probably going to think something's wrong with me, so I'm not even going to go there. So then I don't have the words, and all I know how to do is use my body to express myself to you. And so it's really an awesome journey, and we're starting to explore and help him reorient himself with himself and his feelings, the sensations, the cues that say, okay, maybe this is what you're feeling. Help me describe. Is it a color? Is it like a tightness? Is it a light feeling? Is it pinching, pressure, heavy, hot? Is it cool, warm, light, airy? Really tuning into those signals and speculating, oh, is this pain? Is this hurt? Is this love? Is this acceptance? Really probing for those areas and seeing where we go.
Wow, that's a deep way to have to that's building emotional intelligence, right? Yeah. That's it right there. Yes. And the ways that normally a child would do that, I could see how you'd have to sort of reintroduce them one by one and get in touch with them. That's really deep.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it can feel so scary. A lot of us are afraid of the unknown, right? And those unknown parts of ourselves. And a lot of times we tend to think everyone else is judging us. And when I go through this with clients, I find it's actually they're judging themselves. Yeah. And so I teach them, again, we challenge the evidence and help them to come to this unconditional positive regard for themselves, right? If there's some part of yourself that you don't like very much that is hurtful to others, okay, we can work on that. But you're not defined by your mistakes, right? And we look at the good parts and we want to amplify those good parts and again, help you to accept yourself as lovable and valuable and not hold that person back, not hold it back from you, not hold it back from your partner, and definitely not hold it back from your life because it all trickles to each other.
Well, when we get back from the break, I'd like to talk about another aspect that I see a lot of women in particular holding back, and that is their sensual self if they've had some sort of sexual trauma. So I know that you have seen this in your practice a lot when someone has either in their childhood or somewhere in their adulthood, whether it was rape or some sort of other type of molestation, it leaves this traumatic wound that causes a lot of women to really wall off their sensual self. And the biggest challenge that I've seen is for these women who finally meet and marry a beautiful person. And I've heard it so many times that they say, I really do trust my husband. I really do believe he loves me. And yet I'm finding it so hard to accept that I'm lovable and to accept pleasure and all of that. So when we get back from the break, can we pick it up there?
Absolutely.
Great. You're watching Liberate Your Authentic Self with me, Dr. Andrea Pennington. Check me out on Instagram at Dr. Andrea Pennington. And now back to the show. Many of us consider sexual trauma to be one of the most traumatic things a person could experience. And how do you repair after that? How do you heal and then go on to have a pleasant, joyful, and even delicious sexual life? Well, my guest today, Anabelle Bugatti, is going to help us understand this path toward healing. So Anabelle, before the break, we talked about how hard it can be to share our vulnerabilities, to be open and honest with our partners about things in our past. What has it been in your experience working with couples where one partner may have experienced some sexual trauma in the past?
That's a really, really great question. And I have seen this come up in a variety of ways in couples relationships. And I've seen clients who have been raped. Rape is a lot. Also molested by either a family member or a neighbor kid or the babysitter. It's really scary and disturbing the ways in which these things happen. And one of the fundamental, it's a pattern that I notice with all clients who have gone through this kind of trauma, is that after the trauma occurred, there was no safe place for them to turn and find healing. If they tried to tell a parent, their parent dismissed it, told them they were wrong, that that person couldn't possibly be doing that, that they must have misunderstood. And from what we know about the science of attachment and bonding, we know that that right there is the nail in the coffin. It's already dangerous enough to have gone through this, but then to not have anybody there to tell you, yes, this was wrong, this was a violation, let me help you feel safe and protected. Instead, they feel further unprotected by those closest to them. That becomes a deeper part of the betrayal. And then it becomes harder for them to open these wounds to get healing, because they've already been told, no, that's not acceptable. You're wrong. That didn't happen. And that's so hard, so hard. And, you know, with a lot of my clients, I find also that their spouse has only a vague awareness of what happened to them. They really don't know the depth, and therefore they have a really hard time understanding what happened to them and how, you know, like I have a very young client. She's like in her mid-20s, and they have some little kids, and they came in because their sex life, you know, they have no sex life. And the husband is like, I want sex. Of course he wants sex. He wants to be with his wife. But for her, she has these traumatic responses around sex. Her body actually goes into shock. And it's understandable, because her first experiences, she was 4, she was 16, you know, 2 different experiences, but her first 2 experiences with sex and sexuality were under threat and harm, and they were dangerous. So her body and the first thing that happens to you with any experience becomes your foundation for all the other experiences. So when her first experience for sex and sexuality was under harm and duress and stress, of course, her body associates this negative response with sex. It doesn't say this is safe, this is pleasurable, this is something we can explore. And it's a huge boundary violation. And you know, it can be very difficult to be touched by others in those cases, especially if a stranger, you know, crossed that boundary and violated you, and it was extremely traumatic. Maybe they tied you up, kidnapped you. I've had all sorts of things happen to my clients. And, you know, when their spouse touches them, they actually like get this scared response. And their spouse has no idea. They feel like, my spouse is just pushing me away. Yeah. I don't get it. I feel unwanted, unloved, and I don't get it. We're supposed to be having sex. And a lot of these clients have never, you know, seen a therapist for healing on this. And that is such an important part of this, because that trauma gets locked away in your body. Your body keeps score. And that's a book, actually, but it absolutely does keep score. It has a memory of it, and it's obviously affecting your relationship. And until we are able to distill the power and sort of separate the muscle memory from that memory and release the power, take the power away, you're not really able to, again, experience the healing that you need to have so that you can experience love and intimacy and touch, you know, from your spouse. And a lot of them will say, you know, my spouse is my safe place. But, you know, again, their spouse may be their safe place, but sex is not. Sex is a safe place for them. And being able to go through that healing, and oftentimes, you know, I'll have clients get like EMDR type of therapy. Really, you want an expert who can help with trauma, who's trained in trauma.
What is EMDR for those who've never heard of it?
It's eye movement desensitization, rapidization, or reprocessing. So it's a neurological type of trauma therapy that helps clients. It helps the body unpair the physiological traumatic response from the actual cognitive memory. And that way it helps relinquish that power, so that if you get into, if you want to have sex, your body no longer freezes up. There's women who have dyspareunia, vaginismus. They have several ways where their body, like actually the muscles in their vagina will close off that says no entry, right? Because this is dangerous and scary, right? And in your mind, my spouse is safe, but this just does not feel safe. So we want to help, unlink those, but after they're able to go through that and a lot of the power of the memories neutralized, I find it really helpful for them to invite their spouse to one of their trauma sessions so that the partner can witness some of the healing. And it opens up this whole new world for their spouse. And they're like, I had no idea. And in that way, then the partner understands exactly what happened to their partner and how they're triggering their partner and why their partner responds, and that it's not them and they're not unlovable or unattractive. And they're able to become a part of that healing and additionally create a safe space for their partner. And a lot of clients, after they're able to heal the deepest parts of the trauma, they start the early exploratory phases of sex and sexuality. It's guided. It's very slow. The therapist may have you start off with sensate focus activities where you're working on touch and sensual touch in a way that you're starting to allow yourself to feel it, but that it doesn't feel threatening or scary. And you sort of build up from there. It can be a slow process, but when both people are invested in the healing and they really love each other, it's not a problem for them. And eventually they are able to get back to that place and find healing and have a wonderful and amazing sex life. But both partners have to be part of that healing process. You can't keep your partner on the outside because, again, they're left making up their own assumptions, and then they're thinking it's a relationship issue or it's me, and it's not the case, right?
Yeah, I could see that. In addition to EMDR, are there any other techniques that you recommend people try for getting past those traumatic memories? Absolutely.
So there's actually a lot of different types of trauma therapies out there. And, I actually have a YouTube channel, We Heart Therapy, and I've done a bunch of different videos on different types of therapy. So you might want to take a look at that and orient yourself because you want to find a type of therapy that works good for you. There's a concern that sometimes retelling the story can re-traumatize you, and we want to be careful from that. And sometimes it's not traumatizing when you have somebody that's really trained and focused and they help weave in and out of the story, going back to, okay, bring me back to a time where you felt safe, right? So we ground you and bring you back to safety and then bring you back in so that we can start distilling those. So there's EMDR, there's the emotional freedom techniques, which is a tapping. There is, there's parts in memory where they work on taking those memories and, again, sort of finding a cognitive way to reprocess it. And part of it is, okay, now imagine you're taking this memory and you're putting it in a box or you're putting it in a fireplace. Like, you come up with it in the session with the therapist, and then you go through this guided experience where you are ridding yourself of that memory, lighting it on fire, sending it down a lake, whatever it is that you have to do to get it away from you and release it forever. There's cognitive therapy. There's emotionally focused therapy, which is a type of therapy that I do, which we emphasize safety and the importance of the attachment bond as part of the healing process. But no matter what, it's got to be safe. And the point is to help you feel like, okay, I can finally release this. And I don't need to be held in bondage by it anymore. Because that's really what it does. It holds you in and keeps you from having this authentic love relationship that feels good for you and for your spouse.
Do you ever find that hypnosis is helpful?
If it works, I personally am not somebody who can be hypnotized. So,
Okay.
and there's a lot of skepticism around it, but I'm one of those people that says, if it works for you, then, as long as it's helping you and not harming you, that's the important part. And sometimes people don't even recognize how their trauma is affecting them. And I've had clients come to me for therapy, and, she came to me. I've had quite a few of these women who have come and said, oh, well, I have PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, right? So it's like PMS on steroids, and you're the doctor, so you can speak to that. And when I was going through their history, a huge light went off, and I said, this is not PMDD. You're having a traumatic response to what's going on. And when we uncovered that, for them, they had the big aha moment. Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And then we were able to begin the journey of healing. And there is a really great book that I have my clients go through. It's called The Courage to Heal. It's a book and a workbook, and it is powerful, and it brings up some scary things. That's why we go through it in session and very slowly, but it definitely helps with the healing process. And as it says in the title, the courage to heal. It is scary and it can be lonely, but I am here for you. I can help your spouse be there for you or whoever you need, but we want to provide a sense of safety as you go through this courageous journey.
Well, how wonderful. Well, I love that you describe yourself as a partner. That people don't have to go this alone. And whether they are there in Nevada, they can visit you at LasVegasMarriageCounseling.com. But you also do coaching via the web, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Relationship coaching, career coaching. And I love helping people do an entire character makeover.
A character makeover. Wait. You got to describe that.
So it's those people, again, who are on this path to success and they want to go to self-betterment, but they recognize that there's some aspects of themselves that, are becoming character flaws. Like they're allowing hurt to poison, they're allowing anger and bitterness to sort of poison their personality, and they're becoming angry and lashing out at other people. And so we work at those parts of self that are hurtful and damaging to their life, and work on techniques to change those in a way that feels authentic to the person and help them own and adapt those new places of themselves. And again, integrate those to the other parts of themselves that are amazing and successful, and then help them again take these new skills and help that to become even more amazing so that they feel like they are this positive, well-rounded, congruent, authentic person who can have the most successful life that they want, and they're not inhibited in life, love, career, success.
I love it. I can think of a few people who could use that. Because we all go through stuff, but I think sometimes we get these coping mechanisms. And I know some people who became very angry as their kind of coping mechanism, and they lead with this very aggressive front. It's like, you have so many good qualities deep in there. Why don't you lead with those instead?
Exactly. And sometimes it's those qualities that give people the wrong impression and mislead people away. They can lose job opportunities, if they're this way in interviews. And it really deters people from seeing the amazing, beautiful person they really are on the inside. And you're right. It's not what we go through. It's how we go through it that makes a difference. So being able to go through these things and become a really respectable, amazing person on the other side is a big part of the process.
I love it. Well, there you have it. You can get a character makeover with the lovely Anabelle Bugatti. You can check her out online at wehearttherapy.com, as well as check out her YouTube series on all these different types of counseling therapy and interviews. And that's at youtube.com. wehearttherapy is her username there. Anabelle, it's been a pleasure to connect with you again. I'm so inspired by what you're doing in the world, and I still can't believe that you're going for this PhD. So pretty soon we'll be calling you Dr. Anabelle Bugatti. Congratulations to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for just the love and the light that you send out to the world. You are amazing. You are an inspiration and a true joy. And, you know, if you guys haven't seen her other videos, please, please, she is amazing. Absolutely amazing. And buy her books.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I definitely pour my love and my desire to see people well and thriving. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Well, my friends, there you have it. Check out Anabelle at wehearttherapy.com. And remember, you are a gift to the world. So share your presence with passion. Until next time, much love. Bye. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Dr. Andrea. And did you know I'm on the radio daily? Visit AmericaOutloud.com to download the Talk Radio app.